Sometimes the greatest love is the one standing quietly in front of you while you're busy looking somewhere else. Ethan Brooks smiled as he folded the last cardboard box and slid it onto the shelf beside the apartment door. It wasn't much of a home, just a modest second-floor unit overlooking a narrow street lined with old maple trees and weathered brick buildings, but it was warm, clean, and filled with the kind of laughter money could never buy. 8-year-old Lily sat cross-legged on the living room rug, coloring a picture of 3 tiny birds resting on the same branch. She looked up with bright blue eyes that still believed every ordinary day held the possibility of something wonderful. "Daddy," she asked, "do you think first dates are scary?" Ethan laughed softly, setting his hammer inside a worn toolbox. "Only if you forget to be yourself." Lily grinned. "Then you'll be okay." He shook his head with a smile. "I hope so." Outside, a cool September breeze stirred the golden leaves, carrying the faint scent of fresh coffee from the cafe across the street. The evening sunlight stretched across the apartment windows in long amber ribbons, turning the little place into something almost magical. Ethan glanced at the clock. He still had an hour before dinner. His first date in nearly 5 years. 5 years since cancer had quietly stolen his wife. 5 years of raising Lily alone. 5 years of choosing overtime instead of weekends, grocery coupons instead of vacations, and bedtime stories instead of lonely evenings. Tonight felt different. Not because he expected miracles, but because for the first time, he was allowing himself to believe life might still have another chapter waiting. A gentle knock echoed through the apartment. 3 slow taps. Familiar. Predictable. Ethan opened the door to find Victoria Hayes standing in the hallway, dressed in a charcoal business suit that looked as though it belonged on the cover of a financial magazine rather than inside an aging apartment building. Every detail about her reflected quiet success, from the tailored coat draped over one arm to the understated diamond earrings that caught the fading sunlight. She owned Hayes Urban Living, one of the largest real estate companies in the state. She could have lived anywhere in America. Yet every Thursday evening, she personally visited this building she technically no longer needed to manage. "Good evening, Ethan," she said with her usual composed smile. "Just making my weekly inspection." "Perfect timing," Ethan replied warmly. "Come on in." Victoria stepped inside, her eyes drifting naturally toward Lily, who jumped up and wrapped her in a quick hug. Miss Victoria." Victoria's polished expression softened instantly. "Hello, sweetheart." She handed Lily a small paper bag. "Your favorite cinnamon cookies. You're the best," Lily exclaimed before racing toward the kitchen. Ethan chuckled. "You're spoiling her." "I don't mind," Victoria answered quietly. They walked together toward the living room while Ethan casually picked up his jacket from the couch. Victoria noticed the crisp blue button-down shirt, freshly pressed, the polished shoes, the faint hint of cedar cologne she had never smelled before. It was different from his usual work clothes. Different enough to make her curious. "Big plans tonight?" she asked, keeping her voice light. Ethan smiled, almost shyly. "Actually, yes." I finally said yes to a dinner invitation. "It's just a date." The words landed with surprising weight. Victoria's smile never disappeared. "That's wonderful." Her voice remained calm, graceful, almost effortless. But inside her coat pocket, her fingers slowly tightened around the small ring of apartment master keys until the cool metal pressed deeply into her palm. Ethan never noticed. Lily never noticed. The only sound in the room was the old grandfather clock quietly marking another second that neither of them could ever take back. Victoria stood quietly beside the apartment window while Lily disappeared into the kitchen, happily humming as she searched for a glass of milk to go with the cinnamon cookies. Ethan slipped into his navy jacket and checked the time once more, completely unaware that every ordinary movement somehow felt unforgettable to the woman watching him. He had always carried himself with the same quiet dignity. Even after losing his wife, even after working 2 jobs for years, he had never asked anyone for sympathy, never complained when the rent was due, and never blamed life for the burdens it had placed on his shoulders. Victoria admired that more than she had ever admitted, even to herself. "You clean this place better than most luxury apartments I own," she said with a gentle smile. Ethan laughed. "That is because Lily inspects every room before bedtime." From the kitchen came Lily's cheerful voice. "I do not want dust bunnies becoming roommates." Victoria laughed softly, the sound surprising even herself. It had become rare in recent years. Board meetings filled her mornings. Investors occupied her afternoons. Endless reports and acquisitions consumed her evenings. Yet somehow, the happiest 15 minutes of every week happened inside this modest apartment, where the furniture had been repaired more than replaced, and every picture frame held memories instead of expensive artwork. Ethan picked up a small toolbox from beside the couch. "The cabinet door in the hallway still sticks a little. I will fix it before I leave." "You are going on a date," Victoria replied. "Most men would spend this hour looking in the mirror." Ethan shrugged as he knelt beside the cabinet. "A loose hinge will still be loose when I come home. I would rather fix it now." She watched him tighten 2 small screws with calm precision. That was Ethan. Problems were solved quietly, one careful turn at a time. No speeches, no drama, just steady hands and a generous heart. Her eyes wandered across the apartment almost by instinct. The new water heater installed last winter. The insulated windows replaced during spring. The freshly painted hallway outside his door. Ethan believed the property management company had upgraded the building after an annual inspection. He had thanked her politely with homemade banana bread for what he thought had been routine maintenance. He never knew she had personally approved every repair after reading the maintenance reports. When she discovered the old heater had failed during a snowstorm, she had canceled an executive dinner to make certain a replacement was installed before midnight. When she noticed drafts coming through the aging windows, she quietly ordered custom replacements without charging him a single dollar. Every improvement had been hidden behind official paperwork because she refused to let kindness become a debt. Lily returned carrying 3 glasses of milk. "Miss Victoria, Daddy says dates are supposed to be fun. Were your dates fun?" The question lingered in the room. Victoria hesitated only for a heartbeat. "Most of mine were business dinners pretending to be dates." Lily frowned. "That sounds sad." Victoria smiled gently. "Maybe it was." Ethan looked up from the cabinet. Everyone deserves someone who makes coming home the best part of the day. Those simple words settled deeply inside her heart. She lowered her eyes before either of them could notice the emotion quietly gathering there. For years, she had built towers of glass, signed contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and appeared on magazine covers celebrating her success. Yet standing inside this little apartment, listening to a tired father talk about home as though it were life's greatest treasure, she realized there were victories money could never purchase. As Ethan stood and brushed the dust from his hands, his phone vibrated with a message. He glanced at the screen, smiled politely, and slipped it back into his pocket. Victoria did not ask who had written it. She already knew it was the woman waiting to share dinner with a man she had silently loved far longer than she had ever found the courage to admit. Victoria left the apartment with the same calm smile she always wore, but the elevator ride to the lobby felt longer than usual. The polished stainless steel doors reflected a woman admired by shareholders, respected by competitors, and feared across corporate boardrooms. Yet none of those accomplishments quieted the ache growing inside her chest. As the elevator descended, she slipped her hand into her coat pocket and found the folded maintenance request Ethan had submitted nearly 3 years earlier. The paper had softened with age because she had carried it far longer than anyone would have considered reasonable. It simply read, "Bedroom window lets cold air in. No ruse. We are managing just fine." He had never complained. He had never demanded. He had simply adapted. That quiet sentence had stayed with her ever since. The following morning, before sunrise painted the city skyline in soft shades of gold, Victoria sat alone in the executive conference room on the top floor of Hayes Urban Living. A dozen department heads waited around the polished walnut table, laptops open and financial projections glowing across oversized screens. "Before we begin," Victoria said calmly, I want every property manager to review maintenance requests from families with children. Delayed repairs are no longer acceptable. Several executives exchanged surprised glances. One vice president carefully cleared his throat. That will increase operating costs by nearly $2 million annually. Victoria looked toward the wide windows overlooking the waking city. Then we will earn $2 million less. No one argued. They knew that expression on her face. The decision had already been made. Later that afternoon, while assistants hurried through marble hallways carrying contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, Victoria quietly opened another file that no one else ever saw. It contained nothing about acquisitions or investments. Instead, it listed every repair completed inside apartment 214 during the past 3 years. New plumbing, better insulation, a safer balcony railing after Lily had once leaned too far while watching birds, fresh smoke detectors, an upgraded furnace before winter arrived. Every approval carried only one signature. Victoria's. Every invoice had been quietly transferred into a general improvement budget, so Ethan would never suspect a thing. She had never wanted gratitude. She only wanted him and Lily to feel safe. That evening, Ethan arrived home carrying a small bouquet of cheerful yellow daisies. Lily ran to the door before he could even unlock it completely. "Daddy, how was dinner?" she asked with excited eyes. Ethan smiled as he handed her one flower. "It was nice. Claire is kind." Lily tucked the daisy behind her ear. "Will you see her again?" Ethan paused for only a second before answering honestly. "Maybe. We said we would have coffee next weekend." Upstairs, from the balcony of the penthouse office she occasionally used whenever she visited the property, Victoria happened to notice Ethan walking across the courtyard with Lily beside him. She could not hear their conversation, but she saw Lily laughing as Ethan spun the little flower between his fingers before placing it into his daughter's hair. Victoria smiled despite herself. Then her eyes drifted to the single daisy Ethan still carried in his hand. It was probably left over from the bouquet. A simple flower. Nothing expensive. Nothing extraordinary. Yet somehow it unsettled her more than any headline announcing another billion-dollar merger. For the first time in years, the future she had quietly imagined no longer felt certain. It felt as delicate as a single yellow petal waiting for the first autumn wind. The following Saturday arrived beneath a sky so brilliantly blue it made the entire neighborhood seem lighter than usual. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalks. Wind chimes whispered from nearby porches. Somewhere down the block, a lawn mower hummed steadily through the crisp autumn air. Ethan finished replacing a loose fence board for an elderly neighbor before wiping his hands on a clean cloth. Helping people had never been a strategy to earn respect. It was simply the way he believed a community should work. Across town, Claire Morgan closed the cover of the final notebook on her classroom desk before locking the school door behind her. She had taught third grade for nearly 12 years, and patience had become second nature. She appreciated quiet people because children had taught her that the gentlest hearts often spoke the least. Their first dinner had left her smiling long after she reached home, not because Ethan had tried to impress her, but because he had not. He talked about Lily more than himself. He spoke about repairing old furniture instead of buying new. He laughed easily, but listened even better. In a world filled with endless performances, Ethan simply felt real. That afternoon, they agreed to meet at a small neighborhood coffee shop a few blocks from the apartment building. The place smelled of fresh cinnamon rolls, roasted coffee beans, and warm vanilla. Soft jazz drifted through hidden speakers while sunlight spilled across the wooden tables near the front windows. Claire arrived first, choosing a quiet booth beside a bookshelf filled with donated novels. A few minutes later, Ethan walked through the front door carrying a paper bag. "I brought something for your classroom," he said with an almost embarrassed smile. Claire opened the bag and found a collection of handcrafted wooden bookmarks, each carefully carved with tiny oak leaves along the edges. "You made these?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "Lily helped sand them. She thought your students might enjoy them." Claire gently ran her fingers across the smooth wood before looking back at him with genuine admiration. No one has ever brought my students a gift on a date. Ethan shrugged modestly. Teachers spend every day giving to everyone else. I figured someone should give something back. Neither of them noticed the black sedan slowing almost unnoticed across the street. Victoria had been returning from a meeting with city planners when traffic paused at the intersection beside the cafe. She glanced toward the sidewalk without thinking. Then she saw them through the window. Ethan was laughing softly as Claire admired the handmade bookmarks. The afternoon sunlight rested across the table between them, making the simple moment appear almost timeless. Victoria remained perfectly still inside the back seat while the traffic light changed from red to green. Her driver waited for instructions. "Ma'am," he asked quietly. She blinked once before answering. "Please keep driving." The car eased forward, disappearing into the steady flow of downtown traffic. Victoria turned her eyes toward the skyline, but the image inside the cafe refused to leave her thoughts. It was not jealousy alone that troubled her. Claire seemed kind, thoughtful, the sort of woman Lily could easily love. That realization settled much deeper than she wanted to admit. Hours later, Ethan returned home carrying 2 books Claire had recommended for Lily along with a small paper bag, filled with fresh chocolate chip cookies. Lily greeted him at the door with excited curiosity. "Did Miss Claire have another good story?" Ethan smiled as he handed her one of the books. "She did. She thinks you would enjoy this one." Lily hugged the book against her chest before looking thoughtfully toward the window where the evening sky had begun to glow with shades of orange and rose. "Daddy," she asked quietly, "when people are really nice to each other, how do they know who they are supposed to love?" Ethan looked at his daughter for a long moment before answering with complete honesty. "Sometimes," he said gently, "the heart needs a little more time than the eyes do." Monday morning arrived wrapped in silver clouds and cool autumn air as the city settled into another busy week. Inside the headquarters of Hayes Urban Living, every minute was carefully scheduled, every conversation measured, and every decision expected to shape the future of thousands of residents. Victoria entered the executive boardroom precisely at 8 o'clock, greeting each member with her usual calm professionalism. A presentation filled the enormous screen with financial charts, acquisition opportunities, and quarterly forecasts. Normally, she noticed every number, every detail, every hidden risk before anyone else in the room. Today, however, her thoughts wandered somewhere far beyond polished conference tables and impressive profit margins. "We have received an attractive proposal for the Riverside property," one executive explained. "If we approve the sale today, we can increase shareholder value by nearly 12%. Victoria remained silent for a moment, her eyes resting on the photograph of the apartment complex displayed beside the financial projections. It was the very neighborhood Ethan and Lily called home. Another executive spoke confidently. "Most tenants can be relocated within 90 days. The room waited for Victoria's response. Instead of answering immediately, she quietly asked, "How many children live there?" The unexpected question caused several people to glance at one another. A manager quickly reviewed the report. 143 children, according to the latest records. Victoria slowly closed a folder in front of her. "Then we're not discussing buildings. We are discussing 143 childhoods." The room fell completely silent. "The property is no longer for sale," she said with gentle certainty. "Please remove it from today's agenda." No one challenged her decision. They had witnessed her determination before, but today there was something different beneath her composed voice. It carried the unmistakable weight of personal conviction. After the meeting ended, Victoria stood alone beside the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Far below, people hurried along sidewalks with coffee cups in their hands, chasing schedules and deadlines that would soon be forgotten. She wondered whether Ethan was repairing another porch, installing another cabinet, or laughing with Lily over breakfast before school. She wondered whether Claire had already sent another cheerful message asking about their next coffee together. Her phone vibrated softly. It was not a business notification. It was a weekly property update automatically generated from apartment 214. Routine inspection completed. Smoke detectors functioning properly. Heating system operating efficiently. No maintenance request submitted. Victoria smiled fondly. Ethan never asked for anything unless it was absolutely necessary. Even then, he always apologized for the inconvenience. She opened another application and stared for several seconds before typing a short message to the property manager. Schedule new playground equipment before Thanksgiving. Anonymous community improvement project. She pressed send without signing her name. That afternoon, Ethan received a call while finishing a custom bookshelf for a local family. It was Claire. I found a science museum hosting a father and daughter weekend next Saturday, she said warmly. Would you and Lily like to join me? Ethan smiled as he sanded the edge of the final shelf. She would absolutely love that. They agreed on the plans, and after ending the call, Ethan looked at the framed photograph of his late wife resting quietly on the workbench. I hope I am making the right choices, he whispered with peaceful honesty. Across town, Victoria closed her office door after another long day. For the first time in years, she admitted something she had spent countless months trying to deny. She was not afraid of losing an opportunity. She was afraid of arriving too late to tell the only man who had ever made success feel small that, without ever realizing it, he had become the place her heart had called home all along. SUA Thursday evening settled gently over the city as cool air carried the scent of fallen leaves through quiet streets lined with glowing porch lights. Victoria dismissed the last assistant from her office earlier than usual and remained alone, staring at the skyline that had once filled her with ambition, but now only reminded her how empty success could feel when there was no one waiting to share it. Her reflection shimmered against the glass, elegant and composed, yet her thoughts drifted somewhere far away from boardrooms and business headlines. Without realizing it, she found herself opening an old digital folder she had not visited in years. It contained photographs, maintenance reports, and handwritten notes connected to a single apartment. The first image appeared on the screen. 5 years earlier, Ethan stood outside the building carrying several worn-moving boxes while Lily, barely 3 years old, clutched a faded stuffed rabbit almost as big as she was. The apartment manager had snapped the picture for inventory records before forwarding it to headquarters because the previous owner had ignored several repair requests. Victoria remembered opening that file late one evening after another exhausting acquisition meeting. She had almost closed it without looking, but one detail stopped her. Ethan was smiling at Lily while lifting the heavy boxes, even though the exhaustion on his face was impossible to hide. He looked like a man carrying far more than furniture. Curious, Victoria had quietly asked for additional background before approving the property budget. The report had been painfully simple. Recently widowed, full-time carpenter, raising his daughter alone, excellent payment history despite financial hardship, no complaints filed, no requests beyond essential repairs. She had read those lines more than once. A week later, she decided to visit the property herself under the excuse of reviewing renovations. That had been the first time she met Ethan. She could still remember the afternoon sunlight spilling across the courtyard as Lily chased tiny soap bubbles while Ethan repaired a broken bench that did not even belong to him. You do not work here, Victoria had said with polite curiosity. Ethan smiled without stopping. No, but everyone sits here. It seemed worth fixing. That answer stayed with her long after she returned to the office. Most people asked what they were owed before offering help. Ethan simply noticed what needed to be done. Over the following months, she found reasons to stop by more often. Every visit revealed another quiet act of kindness. He carried groceries upstairs for an elderly neighbor without mentioning it. He repaired bicycles for children during weekends. He shoveled snow from sidewalks before leaving for work because he knew some residents struggled to walk safely. No cameras captured those moments. No social media posts celebrated them. They simply became part of the invisible rhythm of his character. One December afternoon, she arrived unexpectedly with a contractor to inspect the heating system. Through the slightly open apartment door, she heard Ethan reading a bedtime story while Lily rested beside him beneath a patched quilt. The furniture was modest. The decorations were handmade. The Christmas tree leaned a little to one side, because it had been bought at a discount after the holiday rush. Yet the apartment felt warmer than the luxurious penthouse Victoria returned to every night. She quietly instructed the contractor to replace the furnace before the first snowstorm without charging the tenant a single dollar. Ethan later thanked the property office with a handwritten card and homemade banana bread, believing the improvement had simply been routine maintenance. He never knew who had truly arranged it. Closing the folder, Victoria rested her fingertips against the cool glass of the window and whispered almost to herself, "Perhaps I started protecting that apartment long before I realized I was trying to protect my own heart." Saturday arrived wrapped in gentle rain that painted the sidewalks with silver reflections and filled the neighborhood with the peaceful rhythm of falling water. Ethan buttoned his jacket while Lily twirled happily beneath a bright yellow umbrella, excited for the science museum visit Claire had planned. "Do you think they will have dinosaurs?" Lily asked with sparkling eyes. Ethan smiled. "If we are lucky, maybe even a few astronauts." Lily laughed as they stepped outside, their footsteps splashing lightly through shallow puddles. From the top-floor office overlooking the courtyard, Victoria happened to glance through the rain-speckled window just as Ethan opened the passenger door of his old pickup truck for Lily. A few moments later, another car pulled gently to the curb. Claire stepped out carrying a small tote bag decorated with colorful planets and stars. Lily ran toward her with unmistakable excitement. Claire knelt to greet her with a warm hug before handing her a tiny notebook shaped like a rocket ship. Victoria watched the simple exchange in complete silence. There was no jealousy in Claire's smile, no pretense, no competition. She simply cared. Somehow that truth made everything more difficult. Hours later, the museum echoed with children's laughter, excited conversations, and the distant sounds of interactive exhibits inviting young minds to explore. Lily raced between displays, asking endless questions while Claire answered each one with patient enthusiasm. Ethan followed a few steps behind, grateful to watch someone else delight in Lily's endless curiosity. At one exhibit, visitors were invited to write their biggest dream on small paper stars before hanging them on a large display wall. Lily carefully printed her words with slow concentration. Ethan glanced over her shoulder. "Can I read it?" She nodded proudly. The little paper star simply said, "I hope Daddy smiles every day." Ethan felt his heart grow unexpectedly quiet. Claire noticed his expression and gently rested a hand against his shoulder for only a brief moment before stepping. A way to give him privacy. That small gesture carried kindness instead of pressure, understanding instead of expectation. Across town, Victoria tried to lose herself inside another stack of contracts, but every signature blurred together. She finally pushed the papers aside and walked toward the apartment complex without calling ahead or scheduling an inspection. She told herself she merely wanted to check on the new playground equipment scheduled for installation. Deep inside, she knew there was only half the truth. By late afternoon, the rain had faded into soft mist as Ethan and Lily returned home. Claire walked them to the front entrance before smiling warmly. "Thank you for letting me spend the day with both of you." Lily hugged her tightly. "Next time you have to come to my school play." Claire laughed. "I would love that." Ethan watched Claire drive away before turning toward the building. As he reached the lobby, he found Victoria standing quietly beside the newly planted flower beds, her umbrella folded at her side as though she had been waiting longer than she intended to admit. "Good afternoon," Ethan said pleasantly. "I did not expect to see you today." Victoria answered with her familiar composed smile, but this time it arrived a little more slowly. "I was checking on the property," she replied softly. Lily skipped ahead toward the elevator, leaving the two adults walking together across the quiet lobby. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The silence was comfortable, yet unusually heavy. Ethan finally looked at her with genuine concern. "Victoria, are you all right?" She opened her mouth to answer, but the carefully rehearsed words disappeared before they reached her lips. Instead, she simply looked into his kind eyes and realized that after years of protecting her heart behind confidence and success, she no longer knew whether silence was preserving the life she wanted or quietly taking it away. Victoria drew a slow breath, hoping it would steady the storm she had hidden for years. The lobby had grown unusually quiet as the last traces of rain disappeared beyond the glass entrance doors. Ethan waited patiently, never rushing her, never, filling the silence with unnecessary words. That had always been one of the things she admired most about him. He understood that some moments deserve space instead of answers. Lily had already stepped into the elevator, but suddenly remembered the little rocket notebook Claire had given her. "I left in the truck," she called cheerfully. "I will be right back." Before either adult could respond, she hurried outside, leaving Ethan and Victoria alone beneath the warm lights of the lobby. Victoria lowered her eyes for a brief moment before speaking. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan nodded. "Of course. Are you happy?" He smiled gently, surprised by the question. "I'm trying to be." She looked at him carefully, searching for something she feared she had already lost. "And Claire?" Ethan answered honestly. "She is a wonderful woman. She is thoughtful, patient, and Lily enjoys spending time with her. We're still getting to know each other." Victoria forced a smile, but it felt heavier than any business negotiation she had ever faced. "She seems like someone who would care about you." Ethan looked toward the rain-soaked courtyard before quietly replying, "I think she does." Those 4 words settled into the silence between them. Victoria closed her eyes for only a heartbeat. She had negotiated billion-dollar agreements without hesitation. She had spoken before thousands of investors without losing her composure. Yet telling one honest sentence to the man standing only a few feet away suddenly felt impossible. Ethan noticed the sadness she could no longer disguise. "Victoria," he said softly, "something has been weighing on your heart for a long time. You do not have to carry it alone." His kindness became the final piece of courage she had been searching for. She looked directly into his eyes, and for the first time since they had met years earlier, she stopped speaking like a chief executive and simply spoke as a woman whose heart had grown tired of waiting. "Do you know why I never sold this building?" Ethan smiled politely. "I assumed it was a good investment." She slowly shook her head. "It stopped being about investments a long time ago." He frowned with quiet confusion. Victoria continued, her voice calm but unmistakably emotional. "Every repair you thought came from routine maintenance was approved by me. The furnace before winter, the new windows, the safer balcony, the playground that will be installed next month. I never wanted you to feel indebted. I only wanted you and Lily to have a place that felt secure." Ethan stared at her, unable to find words. The pieces of countless ordinary moments began fitting together in ways he had never imagined. Victoria took one careful step closer, her eyes glistening beneath the soft lobby lights. "When you told me about your first date, I smiled because I wanted you to believe I was happy for you." She paused, her voice barely above a whisper. But the truth was very different. Another quiet breath escaped before the words she had carried for years finally found their way into the open. "She cannot love you like I do." The sentence hung gently in the stillness, neither dramatic nor loud, only deeply honest. At that exact moment, the elevator doors opened behind them. Lily had returned without making a sound and stood frozen beside the doorway, her little rocket notebook held against her chest. She had heard every single word, and for several long seconds, no one moved because sometimes the greatest truths do not arrive with applause. They arrive with silence that changes everything. For a few quiet seconds, the lobby seemed to forget the passing of time. The soft hum of the elevator, the distant sound of traffic outside, even the steady ticking of the antique clock above the mailboxes faded into the background. Ethan looked at Victoria with an expression that held neither disbelief nor judgment, only the quiet effort of a man trying to understand a truth he had never imagined. Lily slowly stepped forward, still holding the little rocket notebook against her chest. She looked from Ethan to Victoria before asking in the innocent voice only a child could have, "Miss Victoria, have you loved my daddy all this time?" Victoria closed her eyes for a brief moment before answering with complete honesty. "Yes, sweetheart, for a very long time." Lily smiled gently instead of looking surprised. "I thought maybe you did." Ethan turned toward his daughter. You did. Lily nodded. You always brought my favorite cookies without asking. You remember my birthday every year. You fixed our apartment before Daddy even knew something was broken. Nobody does all of that unless they really care. Victoria felt tears gather in her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief of no longer hiding behind carefully chosen words. Ethan remained silent for another long moment before speaking quietly. Why did you never tell me? Victoria gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. Because you had already lost so much. I never wanted my feelings to become another burden. Then time kept passing, and every day it became a little harder to say anything at all. Ethan lowered his eyes as memories quietly rearranged themselves. The repaired windows before winter, the new furnace, the safer balcony, the playground, the weekly visits that always seemed too thoughtful to be routine. What he had accepted as professional kindness had actually been the language of someone who loved without asking for recognition. He looked back at Victoria. I spent years thanking a company. She smiled through glistening eyes. That was enough for me. Ethan slowly shook his head. No, it was not enough. He stepped a little closer, his voice calm and sincere. Claire is a wonderful person, and I respect her deeply. She reminded me that it was possible to open my heart again after believing that chapter of my life had ended forever. But when I look back now, I realized the person who quietly walked beside every difficult season was never standing across the table at a restaurant. She was standing right here, making sure my daughter and I always had a safe place to come home to. Victoria could not speak. The silence between them no longer felt heavy. It felt peaceful. Ethan smiled with the same quiet warmth that had first captured her heart years earlier. Would you come upstairs? He asked softly. Victoria looked at him with gentle uncertainty. For coffee. Ethan chuckled. For home. Lily's face brightened with the biggest smile either of them had ever seen. She reached out, taking Ethan's hand with one hand and Victoria's with the other before leading them toward the elevator. When the apartment door opened a few minutes later, the familiar warmth welcomed them once again. The little lamp beside the couch cast a golden glow across the room. 3 mugs of hot chocolate soon rested on the kitchen table while rainwater still shimmered outside the windows. Nobody hurried to define the future. Nobody made impossible promises. They simply shared stories, laughter, and the comfortable quiet that only honest hearts can create. Outside, autumn leaves drifted gently across the courtyard where a new playground would soon stand, filled with children whose laughter would echo through the seasons ahead. And inside that modest apartment, the greatest miracle was not that a billionaire had fallen in love with a single father. It was that after years of quiet dignity, hidden kindness, and patient grace, 2 hearts finally discovered that the place they had both been searching for had always been the same simple word: home.